Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to this week's Omnibus edition. Before we get started, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you can get videos when they come out instead of having to scroll and then sending messages going, "Where have you gone? I haven't seen you in ages," which happens on an alarmingly regular basis. So yeah, hit that subscribe button. If you want to, you become a member of the page as well, which is super easy. Just follow the instructions that are down there somewhere, and you'll be able to see stuff that comes out before anybody else gets to see it, which is, a nice little perk, I guess. This week has been a really fascinating one. Everybody is sort of rolling back into the work modes as we get back into work and life and getting past the holidays. And we saw some really interesting things come through, like the government celebrating business vibes. Your vibes and my vibes don't count, but if you're, part of this mysterious business vibes group, that's absolutely fine. Weird way of running a country. And on top of that, there was an opinion poll that was released from Curia, which, it's curious, I take it with a grain of salt, but it does follow a lot of the trends that we were seeing towards the end of last year, where Labour had leapfrogged over National in terms of party support. It would make for a fascinating thing if we were having an election, which we're not on a national scale this year, as far as we're aware. Who knows what will happen when we swap over Deputy Prime Ministers. It's going to be a strange year. Anyway, check out this week's Omnibus if you haven't seen them throughout the week, or if you just want to recap, or if you're bored and you want some background sound while you do the dishes, which is a lot of the time that I tend to have YouTube videos running. Anyway, go check it out, and I will catch you guys at the end. Hello there, kia ora. If you know a woman who voted National, you might want to check up on them, because this weekend has highlighted how deeply problematic a number of party members are when it comes to how they view women. There was news out on Friday that the cluster fudge, that is the health sector slash and burn approach to staffing, has led to some problems, like how firing staff indiscriminately without any kind of restructured organisation and plan meant that there was no contingency in place for how to properly restructure the health sector. And as a result of this, Health NZ are now looking at changes, like moving abortion services under the umbrella of the Child and Youth Department. Now, this is clearly a problematic approach. It's incredibly manipulative and not at all surprising, considering the Prime Minister says that a woman's right to choose is bad, and at least one minister in National ran a quote-unquote pro-life group when he was at uni, although if you looked at him, you'd be surprised he went to university. He looks like he just left kindergarten. They know changing the law would be political suicide, but they sure can guilt trip a woman while they make their own decisions. On top of that, it was also revealed that a recent revisiting of Sports NZ's policies on trans athletes in amateur sports was, in part, driven by backlash from National Party voters, the victims of anti-trans rhetoric and manipulation. Trans people make up 0.7% of our total population based on the last census. It's about 30,000 people in total, a statistically insignificant number. And the number who are self-identified as trans women, the group that's most often vilified by anti-trans rhetoric, in the last census was just a little over 5,000 people for the entire country. And of those, there has never been a single reported incident of harm caused by a trans person in a sports situation in this country. There have been harm caused to trans people, though, and the anti-trans rhetoric is dangerous to not just trans people, but also to cis people. It creates impossible standards of what feminine and masculine ideals are and leads to people attacking those who they think look wrong. It's what researchers call modern-day benevolent sexism, driven by a hostile apathy towards women and a patronizing chivalry towards them. But only when women meet an idealized threshold of what it means to be a woman in the eyes of these men who drive these viewpoints. Sport NZ's plan was a really simple one. Work with each code on what works best for their sport based on the expert advice was from those involved and medical and health professionals, and talk to those involved in the sports. Recognise that these rules are impacting amateur sports, not professional sports, whose memberships are driven by community and connection, and not to vilify anyone for being themselves. But that wasn't enough for National Party voters, who demanded more, demanding that this government gets all nanny state on the tiny amount of trans amateur sports players out there because of overblown and over-amplified rhetoric from disinformation spreaders. Maybe the National Party should be asking why their supporters, the moderate of the three coalition parties, believe these things. It's not like media supporters would say ridiculous things that really don't read the room after all. Oh yeah. Look, every single person has a right to freely express themselves and make choices that are right for them. But to vilify and guilt trip people, manipulating their feelings and those of the people around them to make decisions that are contrary to their self expression, well, that's dangerous and harmful for everyone. Hello there, kia ora. I'm going to say something I don't say very often, and I don't know if I'm going to regret it or not, but I've got good news from the National Party. Building permit numbers in November of 2024 were up on the number of building permits issued in October of 2024. That is good news, especially since October 2024 was the month that saw the largest net migration loss on record for the country. So it's good to see that the National Party can celebrate a win of some sort, even if it's around housing consents with this social media post. I mean, it totally ignores the fact that year-on-year building consents are down 12% on 2023 numbers and down a massive 34% since the peak of consents in 2022, which coincidentally was the last full year without this government in charge. This information was actually released by Stats NZ, along with some other fascinating tidbits. Data backing up the crashing of the construction sector was front and centre, showing that they'd lost about 12,000 roles between November 23 and November 2024. It's about a 5.8% drop in the total number of people working within that sector. The manufacturing and retail sectors, for example, both lost just over 5,000 jobs each, which worked out to be about 2.5% of that total sector. In fact, there's almost 30,000 fewer filled jobs year on year throughout the country. Those jobs, they went from Auckland, which we were told by Simeon last week was exactly what he was focusing on. They've lost 13,000 jobs. There's about 5,000 jobs down in Wellington, and the Waikato's lost about 1,600. And the most impacted age group with these changes are young people. You know, the age group that we were told were going to benefit from 90-day trials in big businesses and who didn't need fair pay agreements to help them secure work, with 42,000 fewer people under 35 in jobs. That coincides also with the highest number of enterprise closures since 2015, with nearly 80,000 in that year. With the country in the midst of the worst recession since the mother of all budgets in 1991, which led to, generational poverty and trauma, it's understandable that the government will want to celebrate every win that they can and spin it as absolutely amazing. But this narrowly focused, really targeted advertising for themselves is really problematic. It's like when Fox News celebrated the miracle of religious items not burning in a California fire, while ignoring the fact that they're made of concrete and aren't flammable. For as long as everyone is struggling around the country and doing it tough, we can expect more of this very specific spin to make those who want to believe that we're keeping the country back on track, which is a really difficult thing for some people to get their heads around, that it's not actually happening. Oh, and if you want more insights from behind the walls, I guess, then join us on Friday. We're back again for our first episode of Behind the Walls. You know what? I'm just going to show you a moody trailer that will tell you to come along on Friday, and hopefully I will catch you guys there. 2025 is going to be a massive year for politics.
The decisions that are made here impact us here, and here.
Not only are we up against a chaotic coalition, we also have a local body election to deal with this year.
Sometimes you need to talk to the people on the ground floor.
And take a peek behind the walls.
This week we speak to Green MP Benjamin Doyle and founder of YTN News and political commentator Matthew Tukake.
Hello there, kia ora. There's a popular expression on the right of politics. Facts don't care about your feelings. It's meant to make having feelings seem like a bad thing, I think. Or that governing to make people in society feel better is bad. It's, probably woke or something. Well, the right of politics in Aotearoa New Zealand agree that facts, not feelings, should be the guiding principle in how they create policy. It's actually one of the reasons why they put into writing in the coalition agreements that facts and evidence should be used to create policy points. I know it's hard to find, but it's probably in there somewhere between removing RSE in schools, allowing grifters to get back to selling unregulated herbal remedies without any consequences, removing all of those mandates that were ended before the election actually happened, putting in place penis police to guard amateur sports ground changing rooms, checking what's people's pants, completely removing Te Reo Māori from government department names, or forcing local councils that had already gone through decision-making processes of their own to reverse those decisions to run expensive referendums that the government's not going to pay for. It's in there somewhere between all of those that they really do think that evidence is more important than vibes. But it does seem that there are some vibes that are more important, those of the mysterious group of businesses who get polled about their confidence in the country's economic outlook. Because business confidence is just business vibes, and what do you know, the confidence levels are up. Like they always seem to be when conservative governments run down public sector services and drive up private sector usage while underfunding the public sector and running it into the ground are in power. We know these vibes are important though, because the government ministers who have spent the past few weeks sharing a few holiday shots of their holiday destinations have crawled out of the woodwork to celebrate the vibes and claim that it's a win, along with other stuff that they want to take credit for. Like Simeon here. He wants you to remember that inflation and interest rates are down under the current government. He's very careful not to mention the fact that these are the results of a huge range of factors, most of which don't come into play because of the government while they were in power or are beyond government direct control, like international exchange rates and supply constraints. Oh, and of course, Nicola had to have her say with this fun press release pointing out that business confidence is the highest since the first lockdown, meaning that the economy is going in the right direction. Vibes are not really there to dictate which way the economy is going. Only we all know that it's not really going in the right direction for the average person. Look, just this week, we got news to expect another fuel price increase at the pump. We got news that there are fewer people employed in some of our biggest sectors, that economic indicators like the number of houses being built are down significantly on the last few years. But Nicola tells us to rejoice because with business confidence comes business investment, which leads to growth. After all, even though the government gave a $3 billion incentive to landlords to keep doing it, the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister who had 7 houses when he started the job and sold 3 of them since becoming Prime Minister after moving the Bright Line test so he benefits directly from policy changes, well, he keeps telling us that we won't get rich selling each other houses. So we need to find ways to grow business. Only the findings of the Business Vibe report say that their respondents are being cautious about investment and hiring, with 17% of firms actually firing or not replacing people who have left. Only they don't use the term firing. That's a mean word. It's actually one of the reasons why economists have said that we should expect to keep seeing unemployment rise throughout the year, to keep expecting to see mass migration and people going overseas, expect to keep seeing wage growth stifled, and keep expecting to see day-to-day costs increase. But don't worry, the Minister of Finance, who delivered the worst economic recession since the 90s, says some very specific vibes are on their side, which is really kind of impressive in a depressing way when you consider that when the government took over, the pre-fu report had shown a stronger economy than expected. That post-lockdown economic recovery that we had was, according to the OECD, some of the strongest in the world, and that had set us up with a very cautious path to success, with some of the lowest debt to GDP ratios in the world and economic focus built on avoiding unemployment built into legislative oversight in a recession could have been avoided. But the vibes weren't right. Pity the facts don't care about your feelings, because right now, for a huge number of Kiwis, the fact is we can feel how hard the economy is tanking and taking us with it. Every time we have to go out and buy a block of butter for almost $10 in a country where dairy is our main export product. But hey, business vibes are positive, so that's all okay. Kia ora. There are a few examples of alt-right idiots out there who are the perfect example of what we call the Dunning-Kruger effect when it comes to the way that they view media. These people are so stupid that they don't realize how stupid they sound, claiming that our mainstream media is a bunch of left-wing shills. Most people realize that that's not the case, of course, and people whose outlook has been radicalized in any direction often have trouble seeing that they're the ones who are wrong. They don't see that they've changed. They think that the media itself has changed. But this week, I came across a perfect example that we can show you to prove how the mainstream media can control narratives in a specific way and push specific perspectives, and how at least one media outlet's been doing that to push right-wing ideologies. This outlet is the New Zealand Herald, which is a really good tool of choice because the Herald has always been conservative. It pushes conservative values and talking points and platforms conservative voices, But the disinformation-swallowing, rabbit-hole-dwelling mouth breathers on the alt-right like to call it a woke newspaper. So it's a great example to use. On Thursday, there were actually 4 stories that highlighted this when put together. The big one, well, this is the story of Golriz Grauman, which has hit the headlines about another shoplifting incident. But there's a bit of a problem here. You see, Golriz resigned from Parliament a year ago, but apparently it still needs to be headline news. Headline news that the police wouldn't confirm her involvement in. The owner of the business wouldn't confirm it. Her flatmate wouldn't confirm it. Her lawyer wouldn't confirm it. And she wouldn't confirm it. No one would go on record to confirm who was involved. So the Herald reported this as the Herald understands and ran a story with a very definitive perspective in their headline. Despite it being a year since she resigned, the Herald still catastrophized it, with no one actually confirming it in the story. Now, this story was their most viewed on their website on Thursday morning. It was not hidden behind a paywall. What was hidden behind a paywall, though, was content that makes the coalition government look bad. There was this story about the inappropriate use of funds from a tourist levy. It set up a showdown between parties about the use of the tourism levy increase last year to make the government books look better than they are instead of being reinvested into tourism infrastructure, as it's designed for. But the general public can't read that whole story. There's this story about the Public Service Commissioner having issues with a number of meetings in the public service, which was also paywalled. Or this story about how inflationary pressure was dropping due to international factors, but our government was actually partially responsible for increased day-to-day costs like food and fuel. They keep open the highly inflammatory, targeted news with no sources and limit the readership and therefore the impact on content that could make something like the government look like it's doing bad. And the outcome is not that shocking. When a media outlet builds an audience and guides what they read and are influenced by, out of catastrophizing and finding ways to victimize minorities, they shouldn't be surprised when they have to shut comments on this type of story. Like this one, about a wedding of the first openly gay All Black, where the comments were so bad that they needed to be shut down. But there will be people out there who still think that they are a left-wing rag with bias against the government. The reality is, mainstream media still has a lot of tools to influence public discourse and to shape the discourse and public views around it. But we also know that most people don't have the skill set to recognize this. But keep an eye out for these tricks to help keep yourself informed and to inform other people around you of just how different media outlets can control narratives and therefore control the way you think about things. Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to this week's The News. Former, as in not currently, a Green MP, Golriz Grauman, is in the news again after mainstream media outlets claimed that she was under investigation for shoplifting. The incident was said to have taken place at Pack and Save Royal Oak, but Pack and Save themselves have said that they would not name the person involved. The police said that they are investigating a claim without naming anyone directly, and her lawyer has released a statement warning the media not to name people, without confirming or denying that their client was involved. But according to MSM, it's totally her. Said a spokesperson for mainstream media, sales and viewer numbers have been slumping over the holiday period, and it's been really tough to vilify anyone on the left of politics so far this year, with the coalition trying to unsuccessfully minimize the feedback that they've received for their highly controversial agenda. So the decision was made to remind racist old folks to be angry at liberal brown people again, because sales always go up when people can be angry at minorities. Completely coincidentally and probably not related in any way, a new Curia poll from the ACT Party-aligned Taxpayer Union, the only poll which in 2024 kept putting ACT's popularity 2 to 3 points higher than any other poll, has released another poll today which shows the Labour Party overtaking the National Party in popularity. While it's easy to warn people to be wary of polls, especially from a company that has such close ties to disinformation for hire groups, a company that is not regulated by the National Regulatory Body for Political Polling Organisations can be one to be wary of. It does continue a trend from 2024, though, which saw the Labour Party overtake the National Party in a number of polls towards the end of the year. But don't worry, mainstream media will be sure to be working on some way to vilify the left, like conflating stories about shoplifting former MPs of colour. Nicole McKee, seen here showing you how planting vegetables over things you don't want the police to find is a great way to mark where something might be buried, has been accused of telling fibs after it was revealed that the, quote, massive amounts of emails, end quote, that she used to justify the return of the ineffective three strikes laws was just 10 emails. When asked for comment, McKee defended her decision, pointing out that as an ACT MP, they see small numbers as having a disproportionate amount of influence, and clearly the Prime Minister agrees. We even got Nicola to look over the numbers of emails, and she seemed satisfied that they were lots. Justice Select Committee Chair James Meagher, seen here wondering why the Justice Committee Chair gets all of the racially divisive bills that ACT instigates, and if it has anything to do with stereotyping anything Māori as being about crime and criminal processes, has stated that the committee will not be able to hear all oral submissions for the Treaty Principles Bill due to the sheer volume of requests. With historic levels of feedback, the number of requests to speak to the committee are on the record side. The committee spent Thursday debating the criteria for narrowing down who does and doesn't get to speak. National Party committee member has asked for only stale pale males. ACT's member has requested no one who wrote for New Zealand, since he doesn't read work by New Zealand authors, and New Zealand First member Jamie Arbuckle will only speak to people who have had their genitals checked first to ensure fairness. In the end, it seems each party will handpick 25 submitters to speak to the committee, which, like the Māori Ward referendum bill, will be split into two to hear submissions that they choose to hear. The government announced an increase in the number of kāinga ora tenants getting warnings and eviction notices in 2024 over 2023. Chris Bishop, seen here trying to karate chop a podium, reported that there were 553 warnings given out in total, which makes up 0.8% of all current tenants within the system. This was an increase of 41 warnings, which is a statistical difference of 0.6% between 2023 and 2024, showing a clearly tougher line on targeting people needing the most help is working to alter those behaviours. Of those warnings, 2% or 11 were evictions, or 0.015% of all tenants. Campbell Johnston, the first All Black to openly come out as gay, was married recently in a ceremony in North Canterbury, where the grooms were choppered in by All Blacks legend Richie McCaw. The New Zealand Herald, however, had to turn off commenting on a story about the event after a deluge of homophobic and hate-filled comments. Said a spokesperson for NZME, "Look, we don't think it's important why we seem to attract these kind of people to our publication and what it means for our contribution to the cohesion of society. Anyway, look, somebody is shoplifting and it might be an MP of colour." NCEA results released this week showed a third of students failed Level 1 courses, an increase of failures from 2023 of about 8%. Education Minister Erica Stanford, seen here showing you all the evidence they base their education decisions on, claims that this change was caused by changing demographics of students taking exams and had nothing to do with rush changes to the education system delivered last year based on erroneous data that the government used to justify stripping funding from departments that they don't like, encouraging students to not focus on the humanities subjects and removing modern tools students used to learn with, like cell phones in classrooms. According to the European Commission Copernicus Climate Service, the United Kingdom's Meteorological Office, Japan's weather agency, and the private Berkeley Earth team, 2024 was officially the hottest year on record, with global average temperatures surpassing the 1.5 degree threshold scientists have been warning against since UN research in 2018 showed that threshold would make the difference in major climate catastrophes much more significant. Across these agencies, as well as others which monitor climate changes, they firmly place the cause on an increase in worldwide emissions from fossil fuels, of which New Zealand recorded its first ever increase in a decade over 2024, as the country looks to reopen fossil fuel extraction. And finally, according to Met Service data, Wellington has had one of the worst runs of New Year's weather on record, but that's due to end this anniversary weekend as temperatures settle to a sunny low 20 as wind changes happen, bringing in warmer weather. However, the less than ideal weather in the capital city is, according to the Post, probably still the fault of bike lanes and the Green Party members of Wellington City Council. And that is this week's The News. Hey, thanks for checking out this week's Omnibus edition. It's really fun to be back at it and putting everything together, and there's been a few little changes that we've made in the back end, that I've made in the back end, that I'm hoping people have picked up on. Like, there's literally changes in the background. Like, Yeah, but in the back end as well, we've made a few little changes as well. So hopefully they're paying off. And if not, well, what a waste of summer that was. Anyway, cheers for checking things out. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, share button, or become a YouTube member if you want to get advanced copies of everything before they come out. Until next time, live long, prosper, be one with the Force. Ka kite anō. I will catch you guys later.
Is it secret? Is it safe?